So a warm welcome to everyone, and in particular, not only to those actually regulars who were quite well known by name and face already, and who where I extend a special welcome to in terms of our meetups. But today I do have the pleasure to introduce two esteemed colleagues from the Netherlands and the UK as well. So who will actually introduce us and share a couple of views and thoughts about data visualization. And you may wonder what has this topic got to do actually in the context of LPM? And the response is quite actually straightforward. LPM, as a structured proactive meta management approach, will generate more data. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? In terms of actually the learnings that you can actually derive from the data, as well as the opportunity to use data for the whole change management process and so forth. And so since James, you will forgive me, I stumbled across your sort of topic a while ago, and you also actually outlined a couple of thoughts already in your regular newsletter. I felt like this is something we would like to share with the broader community. So a warm welcome in particular to you, James, to you, Faye, and to you, Yolita, actually taking us through today's topic. And I'd love to, I just need to change that, make you a co-host, Yolita. And then without further ado, I would like to hand over to you, James, to kick this off. If you don't mind, maybe you could like to introduce yourself briefly, a couple of sentences regarding your background, and the same obviously is applicable to you, Faye, and you, Yolita. So thank you for making time available to share your thoughts, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ignath. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us today. We're really excited to be a part of this. By way of background, my name's James Barrett. I'm the lead legal project manager for litigation and disputes at Eversheds Sutherland. And our approach to legal project management is really a focus on using technology and data visualization techniques to give the best project management to our clients. And I'm joined by Faye and Yolita, who I'll leave to introduce for themselves.
Thanks, James. So, hi, I'm Faye Templer. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to going through the data viz session today. My background is I've been with Eversheds, the law firm, for the last 6 years. I was in marketing and comms. I'm based out of the Leeds office in sunny Yorkshire, which is actually sunny today, and even though we've had a month of rain, which is quite good. And my background, like I say, is marketing and comms, and I transferred over to the legal project management team, and I'm leading on the data viz, and I've worked in the legal industry for over about 15 years now, going from different practice groups, corporate finance to litigation.
And my name is Yolita. It's a Lithuanian name. Hello, everybody. I'm part of Clocktimizer team, and I am rather new to the legal industry. I joined Clocktimizer over a year ago as the customer success manager, and I am currently happy to be transitioning to a product manager role, which is quite exciting. And my background is more in the online education industry, where I manage strategic customer retention initiatives. I'm very excited to see where today's discussion takes us, and thank you for having me.
Brilliant, thank you both. So in terms of today's session, we've been asked to keep the slides to a minimum, which we think we've achieved through methods of mainly cheating. So there are 4 primary slides. But the focus firstly will be just to dive into what data visualization is and the power of storytelling. We'll then look at the benefits and some statistics that support why we should all be using data visualization in our legal project management matters. Then we'll run you through some types of data viz that we really like to use. And then finally, we thought it would be interesting just to touch on how we should be making our reports and data visualization accessible for those, for example, with visual impairments.
Thanks, James. So I thought we'll start with the basics. What is data visualization? So simply put, data visualization is the representation of data or information in a graph or chart or other visual format. It communicates relationships of the data with images. So why is it important? It allows us to be able to spot trends and patterns easily. And it also helps definitely with the rise of big data. We're able to interpret increasingly larger batches of data more easily. It also helps us to be able to focus on areas that would maybe otherwise be lost in other forms of raw data, like tables and Excel spreadsheets. So that's basically what is data viz in a nutshell. And if you then look at getting the most out of that data and how we then build a story with it. So if you look at the high level, is it needs to be relevant. We need to have a good source of data. It needs to have clear narratives and intentional visuals. So I'll start with it needs to be relevant. So this means that the content basically needs to fit with the audience's current level of knowledge, and it needs to be able to reach a goal, help them reach a goal of some kind. So maybe your audience is an internal leadership team audience where you're trying to get them to invest in a specific strategy, or maybe it's external and you're trying to persuade them to use your solution, for example. Either way, you need to have a think about what matters to them and look at what's important to them. So the best stories speak to people. So more the specific the person, the better the story will be. Yulita, do you want to go into a bit about why it's important to have good data?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. Well, I think, being in the business of data at Clockmize, I think a good storytelling needs to include clean, good data. And to me, it means that the data should be from a reputable source and or collected in a way that truly represents what is needed to tell a truthful story. And since data is the center point, these stories, I believe they should never be about what you think your audience should hear. They're about sharing what the objective data really says. And I think this is really markedly different from other stories we might tell every day. Well, the data used should help you tell the honest truth. I think that's really the bottom line. And it is very important that it's aligned with the audience needs and support them in learning exactly what they need to know to make those key decisions across a firm or any other organization. James, maybe you would like to elaborate on the other points, please.
Absolutely. So as Faye mentioned, there needs to be a clear narrative. And when it comes to storytelling, we're all used to a traditional story arc, so a beginning, a middle, and an end. And for data stories, this usually means that you need an introduction to the topic before you dive into the data. And you also then need to conclude with a specific call to action. And this is something that really makes a data story distinct from a straightforward report. You're asking for an output. Also, bear in mind that when you're producing your data visualization, that your audience may not be an expert in your field, and that's particularly true in the legal industry. So bear in mind that we should be using plain language, avoiding complicated jargon and acronyms that may be familiar to us on this call or people within our firm, but may not be familiar to the general counsel.
That's a really good point, James. I think the other key point that you need to consider when you are creating stories with your data is the use of intentional visuals. So what I mean by intentional is, it means whether you use a photograph or charts or a graph, the visuals should help your audience be able to easily understand what the data means. So that's pretty much a storytelling in a nutshell and being able to get the most out of your visualizations. I thought it'd be quite useful just to share a quote that I found from Lydia Hooper, who's part of the data visualization industry. And I thought it sums up data storytelling pretty well. So she says, data storytelling couples data visualization with compelling narratives that helps audiences better comprehend and take action based on data analysis. While effective data visualization helps people grasp and remember key takeaways, data storytelling is essential for helping them understand why those takeaways matter. And I think that's definitely something you need to keep in mind.
Brilliant, thanks, Faye. So then, what are the benefits of data visualization, both to you and to your clients? So firstly, it's about understanding the story. And storytelling is really the purpose of a dashboard or a data visualization that you create. By designing your visuals in a meaningful way, you help the target audience grasp the story in a single glance. And you need to be sure that you're conveying the story in the simplest way without excessive and complicated visuals. So the more you can pare it down, the more successful your data visualization will be. One of the other benefits is about making difficult conversations easier. So if you're able to visualize the benefits and the justifications of what you're asking for, so in an LPM function, this could be where the budget's gone completely south and you need to demonstrate that your scope and assumptions were perhaps not what they should have been. If you do this using visualization, hopefully you can get that message across more clearly and have a conversation based around the actual situation. It's also really useful for identifying relationships within organizations, and we'll touch on this in a bit more detail in the later slides.
The other benefit of data viz is definitely being able to identify patterns within the data. So if you have large amounts of complicated data, there's multiple opportunities there for insights when we're able to visualize it. So visualization allows business users to recognize relationships between the data, providing greater meaning to it. So exploring these patterns helps users focus on specific areas that require attention in the data so that they can identify the significance of those areas to drive their business forward. It means you can quickly identify errors in data as well, as visualizations help to identify flawed data sooner. Overall, what does this mean? It means that you can have better analysis of your data, which ends in a result of the stakeholder being able to understand the information easier and also be able to concentrate on those areas that they need to, so which means it's more time efficient for them.
Perfect. Then moving on to the remaining dots. One of the really easy wins of data visualization is really about making board pack ready reports. Through making life easier for your client by providing a report that's clear, is in a format that they're used to, or that you've agreed with them, and it's already within their client brand guidelines, so that the general counsel can simply slip it into the board pack, no work required by him or her. It's a really easy win for us LPMs. Another benefit is it enables faster decision making. The human brain grasps visuals more easily than table reports, and so data visualization should allow decision makers to understand data insights more quickly and therefore take the necessary actions with the information they'll be given. And finally, I think, and perhaps most importantly, it should be in a format that can be modified. So set reports, PDF reports are all very good and helpful and suitable for board meetings, but what you also want to be providing your client is an ability to adjust and play around with the information, and that's where platforms come into play. So Clocktimizer, Excel, there are all number of platforms we'll run through later, but that's really a key to be able to say to your client, here's the data set, here's all the information. If you use the sliders, it gives you some information and insights that you perhaps wouldn't have.
And then just to support those benefits, the stats around it are why data viz is important. So as James has already sort of mentioned, our brains are built for visuals, and the stats on the screen sort of explain that. So James is going to just highlight some of the
so they primarily speak for themselves,
Yeah.
otherwise this slide wouldn't be working. But the one that we like is that 90% of information processed by our brains is visual, which is quite terrifying. And the human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. So it really, to me, adds grist to the mill as to why this is the direction of travel for reporting. And if you look at some of the interesting contract projects, I think it was Shao, where they use visuals in contracts to enable people to understand. You're really seeing why people should be moving in this direction. So getting under the sort of bonnet of what types of data visualization is available, and I'll hand over to Faye in a minute on this because she has the details. But there are three main categories. These fall into charts, so graphs, plots, and diagrams. Geospatials, which is the visualizations that depict relationships between multiple points. This is, for me, a really exciting area. And then tables or crosstabs, which present data on two axes.
So if we start on charts, there's numerous different types of charts and graphs that are available, from bar charts to line charts to pie charts. But I thought I won't go into details for each and every one of them. A lot of them you probably use every day in your reports. But I thought it'd be quite useful to just maybe look at the Gantt chart. So this is something that we definitely use within the project management team. So basically it's a niche bar chart which displays segments of time, and it helps to illustrate a project schedule. So James, I know that you use these quite frequently. What's the benefits of using a Gantt chart, and how do the stakeholders that you work with use them and benefit from them?
So as we all know, the Gantt chart is probably the cornerstone of good legal project management, setting out the timeline, I guess, with milestones and enabling you to progress or report on progress against that. To be honest, I'm not sure that lawyers properly buy into Gantt charts yet, but what I do think they do is that they enable us to set out the project or the piece of litigation or the transaction to allow people to really see where we're going and have an initial conversation at the outset of the matter. Whether that gets updated or viewed as things go along, I'm not so convinced. And I just saw the question pop up about Kanban boards, which I'm a huge fan of. I think they're really, really dynamic. They enable people to see exactly what's going on. So effectively, they're 3 columns, sort of to do, done, in progress, or you can play around with them as you wish, and then drag what used to be post-it notes, but of course we're in the online world. You can just drag a card across, and I think they're really, really quite powerful. But,
and they're really good for meetings. So when you're in a meeting, it's one of those Kanban boards are really good to be able to transfer across while you're getting updated on the project, to be able to see what the progression, so if it has been completed.
Perfect. Pie charts.
Pie charts. I found out not so long ago from a colleague of mine who is French that they call their pie charts a camembert chart, which I think is absolutely brilliant, and I'm definitely going to be using going forward. So thank you, Charlie. And then I thought actually it'd be quite good, Julita, if you have a little conversation, tell us a little bit more about the donut chart. So I know that Clocktomize, that's one of the most popular charts that are on there.
Yes, I think we're probably just following the theme. We'd probably call them Gouda cheese charts from now on at Clocktomizer. Yes, but we do use donut charts, and we do get compliments from our customers and their customers for the simplicity. So I think that is probably the main benefit of the chart, that it's just straightforward. It tells you more of the situation at the current point. Not so much the dynamics over time, like some other charts or more in-depth trends. But it is very colorful and nice, and I think that is something sometimes you need as a starting step to get the audience on your side and to start telling that story.
Definitely. And then I think if we go into geospatial charts, so like James has said, this is basically charts based off of maps and locations. There's loads of different types. So you've got your flow maps, you've got spider maps, heat maps. And this is a bit where I thought it'd be quite good to look at the social maps that are available on Clocktimizer, which I know that James has used as well. So Yolita, do you want to go in a bit of a detail about these maps?
Sure, and I'll ask James as well, of course, to add on if I missed anything, please. I'm happy to share some practical examples I hear from our customers, especially not coming from the legal industry. It's quite nice to hear the practical stories. But first, maybe just a little bit about how the chart works. So you see some examples here. It's basically a net of dots, and each dot represents a timekeeper. And if the two dots are connected, it means that the two timekeepers worked on the same activity in the same month for a client. So typically what we can interpret from this data is that the more connections a name has, the more connected you are, or you could say also the more important or more vital your role is in the communication with a client. Also, as you see in the screenshots here, each dot has a different color, so users can choose whether you want to choose to do the comparison based on the location, office location, let's say, practice group, or a timekeeper level. And there is a little play button that allows users to play the chart over time. So the main, some interesting use cases for this that I heard at different law firms. Well, one of the most common ones I hear is really for succession planning. So we see this chart being used to analyze relationships with top, or some firms call them their star clients. If you, for example, filtered on a top client and you notice that a certain timekeeper appears almost like a spider in the center of the web, or you could also notice that there is a group of timekeepers that seem to be isolated from the rest of the team. And if the firm then can use those graphs to really drive the discussions internally and really be prepared to keep their clients happy, even if the key players leave the firm. Another example I'd like to share as well is that this graphical representation can help law firms verify their own claims that they are truly global and diverse international firms. I think diversity and inclusion, audience probably can here comment as well on that, but in every call I have with our customers, I think these are some of the most talked about values and principles nowadays here in the legal industry, the importance of that. And so if you run this exercise, let's say for in a large law firm, and I have one particular example in my mind where a large law firm ran it on their data, and they noticed that their international teams, let's say Hong Kong, London, New York, they tend to collaborate at a certain stage of a project, let's say, for example, a kickoff or maybe the end stage of a project, but then those communications just tend to fade away. And of course, noticing the change over time is interesting and important, but it doesn't mean that it tells us the best way to go forward. So having the visual representation isn't the answer to all, but it can help drive those discussions internally to answer such questions like how can we better share knowledge and drive diversity and inclusion, or when should the teams connect more and why? Because I think, of course, on the other hand, perhaps sometimes it's a waste of time that we, we interact too much and have too many meetings in our days. And data like this and graphs like that can really help tell the honest truth.
Perfect. And I guess as a sort of more practical project basis, you can also use these to similarly see where there's over reliance between a partner and an associate. So if you can see that the partner dot is quite small and the associate dot is quite big, you know that is somebody project managing that project. You perhaps need to expand the associate pool, or just be mindful that there's a potential risk there.
Yeah.
So handing back to Faye.
Perfect. And then we'll end on tables. So tables is as James sort of mentioned, is a visualization primarily on spreadsheets. There's a lot we can do with tables. So we can create pivot tables, for example, and create interactive dashboards. The other way we can visualize data within tables are using data bars or color scales. So that's similar to like the heat map. So that basically means we can use the color to highlight the patterns within the data in the tab. So based off of the value, depends on the color scale. So it's a really useful, we can make a lot of use out of the tables. And then, so that's the type of visualizations. Like I say, you've got your charts, you've got your geospatials, and you've got your tables. Have a little think now. Think about the platforms that we create these visuals on. So I thought it'd be quite useful to have a little look. And start with maybe Excel. Excel is probably the platform that we all use frequently every day when it comes to client reporting. And I don't think we're probably getting the most out of it, or not using it to the highest potential on the whole. So on the screen at the moment is just an example of using pivot tables and slicers to create interactive dashboards. So depending on your client and the audience and what information they require, you can have either a high level overview, or you can have the drill down so that they can have the granular detail. So having that conversation with a client to find out what information they require is very important. And as we mentioned Gantt charts earlier, I thought it'd be quite useful just to show you an example of one, which has got built-in formulas. Again, there's templates available online that you can be able to get for Gantt charts with the formulas built in, and it's just something that is really useful for your day-to-day project managing. And then let's have a little think about some of the other platforms that are out there that you could maybe make more use of or have a look at into. So let's start with Clocktomizer. This is a platform that is data-driven by matter management of budgeting and pricing for law firms based off of time card narratives. It's a platform that has some really good visualizations that Yolita showed us, like with the social maps earlier. And then you've got the likes of Power BI, which is another great platform which you can import your data set to, create interactive dashboards, and it's quite easy to look at your visualizations because you can just drag that in and change that out. So there's a lot of platforms out there to make your life easier to create these dashboards and the visualizations of the data. The thing that you need to also consider, so not just what the audience needs and the information that they require, but how you share that data. So Power BI is a good example that you can give access to your dashboard to the client or the stakeholders that you work with, so that they have real-time data analysis as and when you change and update this over the lifespan of the project. We use HiQ Collaborate, so there's different type of platforms out there available for you to use to be able to share data with clients. And then if you think of that's more data analysis, this Visme, and there's other platforms out there that are quite good in relation to more of a design side of it. So if you're wanting to create infographics or maybe more designed reports with stats and figures in, Visme is a good platform. You can get a free license, and it's quite a good platform to use. So as a bit of a nutshell, you need to sort of think about what your audience needs and how you share that, and making the most out of what platforms available and what platforms that you have already.
And probably a couple of takeaways from my side is obviously keep in mind about how the report's going to be viewed. Is it on a laptop, a tablet, a mobile device? But also, less is more with data visualization, as I mentioned before. I mean, I have the benefit of working with Faye, but often I'm saying, no, take that out, there's too much yeah, more white space, please. So I think it's crucial that you get to the point where what is on the page is saying exactly what it needs to say, and it isn't overly complicated. So moving on then to the final section, and we thought it would be prudent to have a quick think about accessibility. So yeah, we all need to start thinking about how we make our designs, our reports more accessible and mindful of the audience. So as we put on this slide, 1 in 5 people are believed to have a form of impairment. And so whilst data viz is a really powerful tool, we need to have a bit of consideration to who the recipient is and make sure that the report is as flexible as it can be. So in this section, we've come up with a few tips on how you can make design more accessible to your audience.
Yolita, you're going to, shall we have a talk about your scatter charts and some of the things that you considered when you launched the new visualization for that? Because I think that'd be quite interesting for the team of what the process is when you're creating a visualization and whether you consider accessibility for your audience.
Sure, I think it's a great question, and I thought it's a good opportunity to share development of the scatter plot visualization that we've done recently with the team. And normally the process of introducing a new visualization or any feature per se in Clocktimizer usually starts with our customers telling us they need or they want something. They need a scatter plot, they need colors to be customizable, and so on. Then we normally ask a lot of questions. We need to gather data and to verify what is it really that we are trying to solve there, and perhaps there are already other solutions for that. Why do you want the scatter plot? What will you use it for? Who will use it? And one of the main questions we tend to ask is around the value being generated for the firm. So what value will it bring? And I reflected on that process as we had initial chat before the call today. And I thought that I think most of the questions we ask, and I would be interested to know how the other tech companies do that, but we want to deliver value to our customers. So we tend to ask questions around the monetary value, the improved efficiency, time savings. And I think as an industry, we should think about incorporating questions around any physical impediments with when thinking about designs, definitely a little bit more. And I think it can be also a difficult topic to approach, because if you ask who will watch, who will see the chart, what do they need to see, you don't necessarily target these questions specifically or directly at a certain audience. And it can be difficult, I believe, for people to speak up about it as well. But probably just knowing that someone in the audience might have a limited accessibility to the visuals is the step forward that I think we all need to take as an industry.
100% agree. And I think definitely we need to consider this. So this is why we've put some tips in for you. So some things that you can take away. So alt text is a great tip to have. So basically this means if you have an image on your screen that you're sharing, it means you are adding a description to the image. So that if you're visually impaired, they can use their screen readers, which means it'll read out the text out loud to them. So they can have an understanding of what that image is. So I'll quickly do a quick demo in case you haven't seen it before. So you can easily do this by either right-clicking on your image and edit alt text, or you can, if it'll let me do this, because I've got the bar there, bear with me.
I actually never knew how to do that, so that's very interesting.
If you go into, where's my edit? Apologies. I can't access it because I've got a bar open. Apologies. You also can get it on your bar to do your edit. So you can also edit on there. Apologies, I can't access it at the moment. So if you right click you can do edit alt text, and this is where you've got the option to put in a really good description. There is some options here. You can mark it as just decorative, so if it is just an image that they don't need to have knowledge on or understand, that's fine. And there's also the option to generate a description for me. This is quite limited, so if I change this, it just says shape circle.
Which is a fair description, to be fair.
Yeah. So the description is based off of also the name that you name it as. So if you have named that just image 12 on your desktop and you put it in, it can pull that through as well. So it's definitely something that you should consider for those who are visually impaired, to make sure that the images are described correctly.
So the next key thing is really to let the titles guide people. So people's first interactions with a visual or a graph is the title. And in studies have shown that when people are asked to sort of report on a graph or visual, they will basically regurgitate the title. So make sure that what you use is very clear and very understandable.
I'm happy to comment on this one as well. Label data directly. So I think probably the most obvious benefits to those of us that do not have visual impediments is that it simply decreases the work of scanning back and forth between the chart and the legend. But probably the most significant benefit is that it really helps visually impaired users who may have difficulty matching colors with the plot to those in the legend. And I would like to again reference to the social graph as an example here. While playing the chart does help bring it to life, but I think what really helps is that you have the timekeeper names right next to the bubble. So if you show that kind of graph to a group of timekeepers sitting in one room, they really want to find their name. So whether you are visually impaired or not, it just adds that extra dimension and livelihood really to the graph.
I must admit as well, as someone who's legally blind in one eye, I find this really useful. So it's definitely something that you should consider using going forward. And again, it's just a case of you should know your audience, try to find out what needs they have.
So finally, we've set out the benefits of using clear font and color contrast. And as a living example to this, I once marked up a colleague's email just using red text and not knowing that he was colorblind. So unfortunately, my email and the red amendments went out as it was. And so a lesson learned the hard way. A, know who you're working with and what your audience needs are, but B, just having a think about the colors that you're using and the fonts.
Perfect. And then finally, as one of the last tips is, as James said earlier, white space is your friend, but it's also your friend within your chart. So densely packed graphic can be too overwhelming for some people, and it's harder to distinguish between the data sets. So if you do have that white outline, white divider line, it just makes it easy for those to be able to identify more easily the color distinctions. So it's definitely something that you should think about using. And it's so easy to do. It's such an easy option to include. So those are his tips.
Perfect. Are there any questions? I hope you found that informative and get an understanding of how LPM and Data Viz should be happy bedfellows. Happy to take any questions.
First of all, thank you so much actually for covering the topic and sort of taking our hand and leading us through your insights. And over to all attendees, if there's any questions or remarks.
This is just a remark. I'm totally convinced that graphic visualization is essential, and you have given me so much information on which to be more intentional about that. I've never had this kind of input and instruction before, so deeply grateful for what you've done. And I'm assuming we'll be able to get a copy of the slides, or am I mistaken?
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. That's really nice to hear, and we're happy to share the
Thank you.
slides.
And we've got some really useful links on the slide as well, so can navigate you to useful sites and stuff. So that'll be good.
So we will definitely upload that, Larry, actually to the new section we got on the landing page in terms of the resources. I do have actually a question. I mean, in terms of the social maps, and I'm not sure whether I should actually sort of pose it to you, Yolita, or you, James, or you, Faye. I was wondering, I mean, the social maps make sense from an internal perspective, obviously, to understand actually the sort of the collaboration within a law firm. But would you also actually sort of open this up to the client side to see the overall interaction between client contacts and law firm contacts, and see who's actually dealing with whom in order to better understand the communication flows?
James, would you like to share if you already do that at Eversheds?
So at the moment, we don't do that. I can see there being value in doing that. I think to be able to demonstrate strong relations, and yeah, that works both from a law firm perspective and from the client side. So yeah, for example, as a law firm, we work very hard on keeping up our alumnus programs, and I can see that if you were saying to one of the big multinationals, well, actually, let's look at how we're working in your organization. These are the connections, and also, I guess, having that conversation: are these connections at the right level? You know, are we actually bombarding the GC or the legal team, or the senior legal team, sorry, when actually we could be at a lower level? So I think that there's definitely value from a client side. I think it probably needs to be handled quite carefully, but that's global data.
I would like just to add to that as well. Not, I don't have the direct contact of that chart being shared with the customers of the law firms. But if we are thinking of the transparency of data and the importance of that transparency, I think it will be quite an interesting exercise to share it and ask them, do you think these definitely are the key players at our firm, and ask for feedback. And I think, asking for feedback is so important. But if we have a nice, friendly looking graph to share as part of that feedback conversation with our clients, I think that could be an interesting exercise to do.
Yeah, I agree.
I was also thinking of a more practical application, to be honest. I mean, the RACI diagram is not the most popular technique or tool amongst lawyers yet, but it's sort of gaining more attention actually these days. And the big issue is always actually who's talking to whom during actually an actual matter. And you may probably, if you do social mapping with a certain projects, you may find that everybody's talking to one person, that one person is sort of channeling the information to the client side. And that's probably not what you want. I mean, on the other hand, you don't want all of your team members from junior associates to senior partner to talk to everybody at the client. And that may help actually to sort out the sort of the matching challenge that you may face.
That's a really good point. Want to take back to Clocktomizer, Yolita?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts running through my mind. I was thinking maybe there are some more questions also from the audience, but I'm happy just to add on that as well, that it's again, the visualization is just a tool to help us drive those conversations. Whether we drive them internally or externally, it is in the end connecting the 2 points, the client and the firm. And so I think that's probably for me, a key takeaway here.
We've got a question from Larry.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm also intrigued by mind mapping and the visualization that can be done in real time. And I'm curious if there are additional instructions that you might give for those of us who would like to be better at mind mapping.
Faye, any thoughts on mind mapping? They vanished.
Oh, shame.
I will wait for her to reappear because I'm sure she will.
I have to admit, I don't know much about it, but I think I can just comment on that in a way that where do you get the data from and how accurate is it? So this statement clock optimizer we pull from, let's say, a financial system, but if it's not updated for a week, for example, then we don't know if that is a real situation today. So it's probably also related so much with the accuracy of data.
And some of the mind mapping tools that are available today are very, very robust and able to import the real-time data link to information that might be visible and shown in the mind map itself. So again, it's just a combination of visual techniques, and to the point that you've just shared, the tools that are out there are allowing us to make certain of the accuracy of the data as we develop a strategic response to a particular issue in real time with a team. And it's through the visualization of mind mapping connected with the accurate data sources at the same time that I think would be immensely powerful. I would love to learn how to do that better.
Definitely. And I'm also, I have to say, I'm in the learning process, just asking a lot of questions at law firms. What visualizations do you need to build dashboards that really deliver messages accurately to different audiences? One dashboard might be needed for lawyers, another dashboard for pricing people, another dashboard for practice managers that just need an overall overview of a firm. And sometimes I hear, somebody says, well, a partner will not want to see your bubble chart. They want a bar chart because that's what they're used to. So but that's not always the case in every situation, in every firm. So there will be a little bit of a trial and error, and we have to, I think, keep that in mind when we show different visualizations. We need to ask our audience, does it answer your question? What questions do you have, or what do you agree or disagree with? Because I think the charts are, again, they are not there to tell a story from our perspective, but it's to involve people to give feedback on the story, so we really get to, I think, the bottom line and the truth of the data behind it. I think it's not an easy task, but the visuals definitely help us facilitate those discussions.
I mean, I guess the interesting thing about the mind map process is it might actually work better with the clients because they're probably more familiar with it than the legal teams. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of use within a law firm, but I should definitely give it some thought.
Well, when you perfect the process, I would love to learn from you, James.
I also take it as a homework. Thank you, Larry, for the idea.
No,
and I think Faye is having some connection issues.
Yeah, it looks like it. She's trying to dial in and out. Yes. So we may probably need to park this question in that regard. And the so last one from my end is really about, obviously this is a change of mindset. I mean, moving away from long text, long tables, covering pages over pages and so forth towards actually a pie chart or a Gantt chart or whatever is like all about change. And so what's your best tip actually, Yolita and James, actually to make it digestible and find interest with the legal fraternity, in particular partners who have not necessarily been trained on legal design and on color coding and those kind of things?
Sorry, Yolita. No, go ahead.
You go ahead.
From the law firm perspective, I think it's a bit like legal project management. Start with people that are engaged, start with the associates, senior associates, and then work up to the partners. The more that you get the early adopters, the easier it is to do that promotion piece. I think it's also, it does start to speak for itself. So the reason I got interested in data visualization so my former background was as a cost lawyer, so going to courts in the UK and arguing about how much a piece of litigation should cost. And we were working on a group action, and we had hundreds of litigants, and we went in with effectively an A3 piece of paper with a couple of pie charts on. The numbers were all behind it, but we went to the master who was hearing the case and said, this is the data that you need. And it was amazing. What would have taken an entire day took half a day. It cut through so much sort of interpretation time because the cost master could understand. And I think that's the bit around change that's really valuable here, is that if your data visualization is doing what it should be, if it's being clear and speaking to the data, then it does sell itself. But I also recognize that you need to pick the right audience when you start the process.
Yes, I agree on the audience piece, definitely. And I would say, again, from experience, just talking to the law firms, I would say start small and start simple. That's where those donut or cheese, these charts come handy. And identifying the audience. So I would say start with those that want it and need it, whatever that campaign or initiative is. They are people that are eager to learn something new. They could be your champions to drive the change. Then slowly expand it to those that need it, but maybe not necessarily too eager to spread the word. And as you get a group of pioneers, ambassadors of a change or positive impact you want to make at the farm, then try to roll it out to those that need it and don't want it, or perhaps even those that don't know yet they need it.
Larry. He said goodbye. I was actually not sure he was actually raising another question. So this is a lovely concluding actually statement in that regard, and obviously, I mean we had a couple of experts before who talked about legal design, also coming from a more visual vantage point, and they talked about actually the challenge that one faces actually moving away from from written documents towards actually visual representation, and so therefore it's a fantastic actually insight that you provided today. So thanks a lot. Faye, I know you've been actually giving an extra effort here trying to actually hold on to the line. So big applause to you for that actually. But overall, it's great insight, James. In particular, also it's great to see that someone in a large law firm is actually driving that initiative, and usually this is since we all know about the Me Too actually mechanisms of law firm, it's always good to see somebody leading this, and others will follow swiftly usually. So great initiative, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Yolita, it's great to see someone actually driving data-driven meta management and then sort of the visualization aspect of it, because most often we see a lot of talk around you need to be more structured around your metas, but we tend to forget that ultimately data is feeding our learning curve. And if there's no data, there's no learning. And if we don't read data properly, meaning we don't have access to that, I mean, where are we going to actually end up with this, other than actually having another data pool that nobody will actually sort of buy into? So thank you for that. And a big applause from my side, and to you, thanks for making time available. So what's left today, the only thing is really to invite you to the next one, actually scheduled for the 10th of June. And I'm glad we managed actually to invite Dan Kane, amongst others. He's the General Counsel Network Rail, and he's the sort of the spiritus rector, the mind, the driver, and the leader behind the O-Shaped Lawyer Initiative. And as you may know, there's 3 global initiatives at the moment happening around drawing up a new competency framework for lawyers or legal project management in particular, one by the International Institute of Legal Project Management, the other one by a couple of law firms in the UK. And ultimately, there's the O-shaped lawyer together actually with the Delta lawyer. So it's great to hear about what the future competencies should look like of the lawyer of the future and how that ties into actually, delivering better legal services. So, and he will be joined by a former senior associate of A&O, Dr. Nadine Lilienthal, who turned actually an associate turned coach, and she's talking about the invisible factors in legal project management and meta management, and what to look out for in order to actually drive and lead the meta actually to a successful end, and sort of pick up the things that you may not necessarily have on your radar screen as a normal action point. So you're all invited, spread the word. The session obviously will be shared shortly on YouTube, like all the other sessions. So thanks again for participation and comments and interactions happening, and look forward to seeing you again. So in times of COVID-19, unfortunately, keep healthy. Hopefully you will get vaccinated shortly. So all the best wishes from over here, and see you soon. Thank you.